In 48 BC, the greatest library on Earth burned. The ancient harbor of Alexandria glowed with the orange light of catastrophe as flames climbed the wooden shelves of the world's first great archive of human understanding. Papyrus curled in the heat. Ink turned to smoke. Centuries of questions and answers, dreams and discoveries, disappeared into a night sky that swallowed them without mercy. People watching from the streets would have seen the fire, but few understood what it meant. This wasn't just the destruction of a building. It was the unraveling of thousands of human lives that had been spent chasing truth, the collapse of memory, the sudden silencing of voices that had worked tirelessly to understand the world before them. Since that night, historians, philosophers, and dreamers have asked the same question: what was lost? And can we rebuild what vanished? It's a paradox that shapes our modern age. We live in a time when almost any piece of information is a search bar away. Yet the shadow of the Library of Alexandria lingers, reminding us that knowledge isn't just data. It's fragile, human, and painfully easy to lose. Even with the world's information glowing in our pockets, we still feel the ache of ancient wisdom that slipped through our fingers. And sometimes, it feels like the flames never fully went out. We imagine the Library of Alexandria as a temple of learning, but that undersells what it truly represented. It was humanity's first great experiment in building a universal memory, a place where the accumulated curiosity of entire civilizations was collected, debated, and rewritten. In a world of empires constantly reshaping themselves, Alexandria tried to gather everything we knew at once. That ambition is what ignited its myth. Its destruction became one of history's most symbolically charged tragedies, because it wasn't just a building burning. It was the idea that knowledge could disappear, that brilliance could vanish, that entire eras of thought could slip into the abyss simply because the world turned chaotic for a moment. The library's story is a cautionary tale carved into our collective memory, a reminder that the pursuit of wisdom is always balanced on the edge of loss. And it raises a deeper question. If knowledge is so fragile, how do we preserve it? To answer that, we have to return to the beginning, back to a city built on ambition, back to the scholars who crossed oceans to read words written centuries before their births, back to the first librarians who believed that gathering every idea under one roof might help us understand the universe itself. The Library of Alexandria began as a dream. In the aftermath of Alexander the Great's conquests, his general Ptolemy I took control of Egypt and built a new capital along the Mediterranean. This city, Alexandria, was young, ambitious, and hungry to become the intellectual heart of the world. To make that happen, Ptolemy needed something no empire had ever attempted on this scale: a centralized repository of all knowledge. He envisioned a library whose mission was not just to collect, but to illuminate. Scholars flocked to Alexandria from Greece, Persia, India, North Africa, the Levant. They traveled dusty roads and sailed restless seas carrying scrolls, letters, and ideas. Some arrived with nothing but questions, knowing that within the library's halls they might find someone who had tried to answer them centuries earlier. To walk through the ancient library of Alexandria was to step into an atmosphere charged with intellectual electricity. The building's architecture is lost to time, but accounts describe a sprawling complex of lecture halls, gardens, reading rooms, and vast storage chambers lined with papyrus scrolls. Light filtered through lattice windows. The scent of ink and reeds lingered in the air. Imagine an ancient librarian waking with the sun. They dress in linen robes and walk through cool corridors toward a scriptorium where scribes are already copying text by hand. Each stroke of the reed pen is a quiet prayer against forgetfulness. Outside, the harbor roars with the sounds of arriving ships. Alexandria was a global crossroads, and its library treated that as an opportunity. According to tradition, customs officers inspected incoming vessels not only for trade goods, but for books. If a ship carried scrolls, they were taken to the library, carefully copied, and added to the collection. The originals stayed in Alexandria, the duplicates returned to their owners. It was an audacious system, equal parts brilliant and controversial, yet it revealed the library's mission with unmistakable clarity: collect everything, preserve everything, understand everything. Within its walls, knowledge was not a static treasure, but a living ecosystem. Scholars debated astronomy in airy courtyards. Physicians studied anatomy by dissecting animals. Mathematicians traced geometric figures in sand. Poets recited verses that echoed down the halls long after their words had ended. The library didn't just store knowledge, it generated it. Here, Euclid refined the foundations of geometry. Eratosthenes calculated the circumference of Earth with astonishing accuracy, using poles, shadows, and curiosity. Herophilus mapped the human nervous system. Astronomers charted the stars and speculated about worlds beyond our own. See, the library operated like a neural network of its age, synapses firing across cultures and disciplines, generating insights no single civilization could have created alone. Its destruction, then, was not one moment but a slow unraveling across centuries. The romantic image of a single catastrophic fire is powerful, but history suggests a more complex story. Multiple events, political instability, battles, and religious shifts gradually eroded the institution. Scrolls were damaged, scattered, neglected, burned at different times. Some parts may have fallen long before others. The library's final remnants disappeared around the 4th or 5th century AD. But if the exact cause is blurry, the emotional truth is sharp. Humanity lost an unthinkable amount of inherited wisdom. Now, imagine that librarian walking through the quiet halls during the library's final years. They move past empty shelves where thousands of scrolls once stood. Dust gathers where scholars once argued. The walls feel colder, as if memory itself is retreating. Outside, the city shifts under new regimes and new rules. The library's mission, once celebrated, now feels fragile, almost dangerous. The librarian pauses beside a table where a half-copied scroll lies unfinished. They run their fingers across the parchment, knowing that when they are gone, the knowledge contained here may vanish with them. That realization is devastating, and yet, something else flickers beneath it. A stubborn hope. Because knowledge, like fire, spreads. Even as Alexandria declined, fragments of its collection lived on in other libraries, other cities, other hands. Scrolls copied in its halls traveled to Antioch, Constantinople, and the libraries of the Middle East. Scholars who had once studied in Alexandria carried their learning across continents. The idea of Alexandria did not burn, it dispersed. Human knowledge rarely moves in straight lines. It flows like a river, swelling in one era, narrowing in another, splitting into tributaries, drying up in places only to surge unexpectedly somewhere else. The Library of Alexandria symbolizes this truth more than any other institution in history. When Rome fell and Europe plunged into centuries of turmoil, countless works disappeared, libraries collapsed, records were lost. But in parallel, Islamic scholars in Baghdad, Damascus, and Cordoba preserved, translated, and expanded upon Greek, Persian, Indian, and Egyptian knowledge. They guarded fragments of the intellectual heritage that Alexandria once nurtured. Centuries later, during the Renaissance, these preserved texts flowed back into Europe, sparking a cultural and scientific rebirth. It was as if the river of knowledge had wound through valleys and deserts only to rejoin itself in a new landscape, ready to nourish minds once more. Humanity is constantly losing knowledge and constantly rebuilding it. Sometimes what returns is incomplete, like a half-remembered dream. Sometimes it comes back stronger, rebuilt on deeper foundations. Knowledge may burn, but curiosity is fireproof. It reappears wherever minds are hungry. And today, that hunger is everywhere. If the ancient Library of Alexandria was humanity's first great attempt to gather global knowledge, then modern society is its most ambitious successor. We have created digital repositories that dwarf the ancient library's entire collection. Wikipedia alone contains more information than the combined libraries of the ancient world. Online archives, open access journals, and scientific databases allow anyone with an internet connection to access centuries of accumulated research. The scale is staggering. The accessibility is unprecedented. The dream of Alexandria lives on, not in one building, but in millions of minds connected by invisible threads of information. And yet, this new Alexandria comes with contradictions. It is resilient, storing redundant copies in servers around the world. A single fire cannot wipe it out. But with so much information, we face a new threat: misinformation and noise. The challenge is no longer scarcity, but clarity, not preservation, but interpretation. We risk losing wisdom not because it burns, but because it becomes drowned out. Still, something remarkable is happening. Around the world, people are working to rebuild memory with purpose. Digital preservation projects are rescuing ancient manuscripts through high-resolution scanning. Linguists are documenting endangered languages before they disappear. Scientists are building open databases for research that once sat locked behind paywalls. In Alexandria itself, a new institution stands as a symbolic heir: the Bibliotheca Alexandrina, opened in 2002. It is shaped like a rising sun carved into the Mediterranean shoreline, suggesting that knowledge is something that must constantly be reborn. Inside, millions of books fill shelves under a ceiling shaped like an infinite horizon. It is not a replacement for the ancient library. That can never be rebuilt exactly as it was. But it is a gesture, a reminder that humanity refuses to surrender its curiosity to time. Knowledge resilience is one of our greatest psychological strengths. Even when ideas vanish, human minds rebuild them, sometimes independently, sometimes through inspiration, sometimes through collective effort. The brain is a pattern-seeking engine, and curiosity drives it like wind pushing a ship across open water. Civilizations rise and fall, but the human impulse to preserve meaning persists. We rebuild because forgetting feels like erasing part of ourselves. Now picture a future Alexandria. Not a structure on a coastline, but a constellation of knowledge across planets, servers, satellites, neural networks, everywhere human curiosity travels. A future where every text ever written, every discovery ever made, every language ever spoken is preserved, translated, and accessible. Where knowledge doesn't burn, doesn't decay, doesn't vanish into the dark. Where no one wonders what was lost because nothing is lost anymore. Compared to that possibility, the ancient flames feel like the flicker of a candle in a vast night. And yet, that future is not guaranteed. Knowledge only survives when humans choose to protect it. So, what practical wisdom can we gather from the ashes of Alexandria? First, that preserving knowledge is not a luxury. It's the foundation of progress. Every science, every philosophy, every story we tell depends on what came before. Second, that individuals matter. Every person who reads, learns, teaches, creates, or archives contributes to the resilience of human memory. The river of knowledge flows because millions of hands keep it moving. Third, that curiosity is the engine of civilization. When we value learning, societies grow flexible and innovative. When we neglect it, they stagnate and repeat old mistakes. And finally, that we should ask ourselves, what knowledge is worth passing to the future, and what would it mean if it disappeared? Would we lose scientific truths, cultural identity, hard-earned wisdom about human nature? Understanding what matters helps us choose what to protect. The Library of Alexandria teaches us that knowledge is fragile, societies forget, and wisdom can be erased. But it also teaches us that humans rebuild. We always rebuild. Because the pursuit of knowledge is not just an intellectual project. It's an emotional one, a way of anchoring ourselves in time, a way of carrying forward the light. And even when ancient flames tried to extinguish it, the spark survived. The story of the Library of Alexandria is ultimately not about ashes. It is about echoes, ideas that refuse to disappear, even when the scrolls that carried them turned to dust. When we look closely, we see that much of what we call lost knowledge didn't vanish. It transformed. It migrated. It hid inside metaphors, drifted across trade routes, waited in monasteries, resurfaced in translations, and sometimes blossomed independently in other cultures. Human wisdom is more resilient than any single building. And so, the question shifts, not how much did we lose, but how much did we rediscover without knowing we were rebuilding something ancient? This is the quiet miracle of memory. The world loses knowledge. The world finds it again, often in unexpected places. If we could stand on a balcony in ancient Alexandria and look down upon its bustling streets, we might see caravans unloading goods from Asia and Africa, ships from Athens dropping anchor, merchants speaking in a chorus of languages. The city thrived on diversity and exchange. This made it fertile ground for ideas to cross-pollinate. A mathematician from Cyrene might debate a philosopher from Rhodes. A doctor from Egypt might compare notes with an anatomist from the Levant. Scholars would gather in shaded courtyards to argue about the shape of the cosmos, the geometry of the earth, or the nature of the soul. Knowledge grew in the spaces between cultures. The destruction of the library fractured these connections. But centuries later, similar knowledge networks reappeared elsewhere in the world. Baghdad's House of Wisdom echoed Alexandria's ambition. Timbuktu's Golden Age libraries collected manuscripts across West Africa. Nalanda University in India held philosophical and scientific traditions that spread through Asia. Humanity keeps building Alexandrias, distinct even when we don't call them by that name. Yet something deeper makes the ancient library's story resonate so strongly today. Its destruction reminds us of the psychological fragility of knowledge. Wisdom doesn't fade only because of fire or conflict. It fades when it stops being used, when it stops being valued, when curiosity erodes under the pressures of distraction and speed. In the modern world, we stand at a strange crossroads. We have more access to information than any other generation in history, but we also feel overwhelmed by it. We scroll endlessly, consuming facts faster than we can process them. Our brains evolved to remember stories, not torrents of stimuli. As a result, true understanding often slips through our fingers. It's as if we rebuilt the Library of Alexandria in digital form, but forgot to train ourselves in how to navigate it. The human mind needs structure to transform data into knowledge. It needs connections, context, reflection. Without these, information becomes noise. The tragedy of the ancient library was the loss of context, the threads that connected the scrolls to one another, scholars to ideas, civilizations to memory. Today we face a similar challenge, preserving meaning within abundance. We need a modern librarian's mindset, curation, clarity, and a sense of what deserves to endure. Imagine stepping into another thought experiment. A future researcher walks through a vast digital library, not a physical building, but a luminous archive floating within a simulated space. The walls shimmer with data streams. Ancient manuscripts sit alongside quantum physics research. Music from 1,000 cultures echoes softly, forming a kind of planetary memory. They reach out and touch a glowing shelf. Instantly, texts open in every known language: medical treatises, theorems, poems, philosophical dialogues. Some from millennia past, some written seconds ago. Nothing is lost. Nothing is in danger of burning. Yet something feels incomplete. Because even in this perfect archive, the researcher knows that knowledge without understanding is inert. A text unread is no different from a scroll burned. A discovery forgotten might as well never have been made. Wisdom requires engagement. Minds must stay curious. Cultures must choose to remember. That is the lesson the ancient flames tried to teach. Human history is a rhythm of forgetting and remembering. Civilizations rise, collect knowledge, and leave behind fragments for others to rediscover. What survives tends to be what is copied, translated, taught, loved, debated, and used. This is the truth behind the survival of Greek philosophy. It endured not because the scrolls were indestructible, but because scholars in Baghdad and Persia and Cordoba translated, preserved, and expanded upon them. This is why Roman engineering principles re-entered Europe centuries later, why Indian numerals, carried across the Islamic world, transformed global mathematics, why navigation techniques from the Pacific Islands found appreciation long after outsiders first encountered them. Knowledge is like a migratory species. It adapts. It travels. It survives through reinvention. And every generation becomes a steward of this fragile inheritance. Today we stand on the threshold of a new era of preservation. Artificial intelligence is mapping lost languages, predicting how fragmented texts might have read, restoring damaged inscriptions and reconstructing stories carved into stone thousands of years ago. Satellite images track archaeological sites. Digital scans safeguard manuscripts against decay. Entire cultures that once risked vanishing are being recorded in audio, video, and text. We are living in the first moment in history when rebuilding the Library of Alexandria is not only possible, it is happening. But even this comes with responsibility. If the ancient library taught us the fragility of knowledge, the modern world teaches us the fragility of truth. Information is abundant, yet distorted. Wisdom is accessible, yet often drowned out by misinformation or polarization. Preserving knowledge in the digital age means not just storing it, but defending its integrity. It means building systems that promote accuracy, curiosity, and reflection. It means teaching people how to navigate information critically. It means recognizing that the greatest library in the world is useless if its readers cannot distinguish insight from illusion. The lesson is humbling. Knowledge lives in libraries, but wisdom lives in minds. We can envision a future where Alexandria rises again, not as myth, but as reality. Imagine a world where every human being can access the total archive of our species' discoveries. A world where scientific data is openly shared, where cultural memory is preserved through immersive technologies, where forgotten texts are reconstructed by algorithms trained on global linguistic patterns. Picture a classroom in 2150 on Mars or in an orbital habitat. A teacher dims the lights. A simulation opens, revealing a holographic reconstruction of ancient Alexandria. Students walk through its halls, listening to the debates of scholars long gone. They compare ancient astronomical models with modern ones. They read texts once thought lost forever. Knowledge becomes time travel. Understanding becomes universal. Yet for all this futuristic potential, something deeply human remains at the center. The desire to understand the world, to pass forward what matters, to keep the flame alive. The real rebirth of Alexandria is not in technology, but in our values. It happens every time someone teaches a child to read, every time a researcher publishes open access work, every time a scientist shares data freely, every time a culture records its oral traditions, every time someone resists misinformation with clarity and patience. Every act of preservation is an act of defiance against forgetting. What then does this ancient story offer us today? It offers a practical wisdom shaped by thousands of years of triumph and loss. First, knowledge is a collective responsibility. No library, digital or physical, can survive without people committed to maintaining it. Teachers, archivists, researchers, volunteers, creators. We are the librarians of our age. Second, curiosity is a cultural engine. Societies that value asking questions become adaptable and resilient. Those that suppress curiosity weaken their own future. Third, preserving knowledge requires diversity. The ancient library thrived because it welcomed ideas from everywhere. Modern preservation must do the same, protecting not just dominant narratives, but marginalized voices, endangered languages, alternative ways of understanding the world. Fourth, memory is fragile when it is not used. A scientific principle ignored can lead to repeated mistakes. A historical lesson forgotten can lead to repeated suffering. A cultural story neglected can fade away. Fifth, wisdom grows through connection. Knowledge is not a list of facts, but a network of relationships. The ancient library flourished because ideas intertwined. Our modern world must foster the same interconnected thinking across disciplines, cultures, and generations. And finally, what we choose to preserve says everything about who we are. What we forget shapes who we become. Picture once more the flames of 48 BC, scrolls turning to smoke, walls glowing with heat, people watching as centuries of thought vanish in a single night. It feels like a tragedy frozen in time, but it also feels like a reminder. Even when knowledge is fragile, human curiosity is not. The fire that destroyed the library did not extinguish the human desire to understand the world. If anything, it intensified it. The myth of the library became a rallying cry across centuries, inspiring scholars, artists, scientists, and dreamers to build new repositories of memory. In that sense, Alexandria never died. It simply changed form. It lives in the world's universities, museums, data centers, and archives. It lives in free online courses and open access journals. It lives in libraries small and large, from national archives to the quiet room in a rural town where a child discovers their first book. It lives in every attempt to preserve endangered knowledge. It lives in anyone who tries to make sense of the world and pass that sense forward. The story of the Library of Alexandria is not a tragedy. It is a beginning. Because its destruction revealed a truth that changed human history, that knowledge must be rebuilt in every generation, that curiosity must be protected, and that wisdom must be cultivated as carefully as fire. We cannot resurrect the exact scrolls that once lined its shelves, but we can rebuild its spirit, stronger, more resilient, woven across millions of minds. And someday, when future civilizations look back at us, they may see that we succeeded where antiquity failed, that we created a world where knowledge could never again disappear into the dark, where the flames of ignorance could not erase the accumulated brilliance of humanity, where everyone, everywhere, had access to the library we once lost. The last embers of Alexandria still glow. We carry them. And with each act of learning, preserving, searching, teaching, questioning, and sharing, we make the fire brighter. Every generation rebuilds the library. Now it is our turn.